I never thought I would ever be in this situation, or having this kind of problem in my life, but like they say never. My husband, 36, was the best thing to happen to me. I knew without a doubt that he loved me, and every day I would thank the universe for sending someone like him my way. He came into my life at a time when I wasn't even looking for love or a relationship. He's so caring and sincere that I didn't think twice about saying yes when he asked me to marry him. My husband was never harsh to me, and I was never at the receiving end of his anger, but now I am, because of a silly mistake I made. I was at the mall to get groceries one evening when I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long while. It was my college sweetheart, and even though I saw him first, I pretended not to and kept on walking. My plan of ignoring him didn't work. I hadn't taken up to 5 steps when I heard someone call my name. He had seen me. I hesitantly turned around and gave him one of my fake smiles. He genuinely seemed happy to see me, and I didn't understand why. He was my college sweetheart whom I loved so much. I had even thought we'd end up marrying each other until he ghosted me in my last semester of school. I called, sent messages, went to his apartment, and even talked to the few friends he had, but they all told me he just needed some space. I was hurt. I couldn't believe he would treat me like that, and even if indeed all he wanted was space, he could have talked to me like an adult. He told me I got it all wrong. Apparently he got robbed and shot. He was even sure he wouldn't survive it, but luckily he was alive, just in coma. He had told the 2 friends of his that I knew that he wanted to go away for a while to figure out some things about his life, so when they couldn't get in touch with him, they both assumed he had done as he said. He told me he looked for me when he woke up, and when he found out I was married, he thought it best to let me be. After he was done telling me his story, I felt bad for thinking he just left me, and the anger I had towards him suddenly turned to pity. I got his contact and made a promise to talk to my husband to help him get a better job. I talked to my husband that night, and he said there was a vacancy at his company so he could fill it. I was so happy, and in that moment, I loved my husband more. I didn't tell him he was helping my ex-boyfriend. A few weeks later, my ex called and said he'd like to see me to thank me in person. I gave him the address, and he came the following day when my husband was out. He looked better compared to the last time I saw him. He had cut his hair to the exact length I liked back in school. He smiled wider, and he smelled good too. We caught up, reminisced on old times, and he asked if I'm happy. I told him yes, and after that, we were both quiet. He was so close to me that I could see his brown eyes. Back in school, I often told him how I'd like our kids to have the color of his eyes, as opposed to my black ones. The memories came flooding back then, and I don't know who moved closer to who first, but all I know is our lips locked in passionate embrace. It felt good, and I loved how familiar his embrace felt. Kissing was suddenly not enough. I wanted to feel his skin against mine, and I could tell he wanted the same thing too. In a matter of seconds, clothes flew around my husband's living room while our hands roamed each other's bodies. A voice was telling me to stop, that I shouldn't be in my husband's house if something like that would happen, but in that moment, it felt like I could die if I didn't satisfy my desire. When it was over, a wave of regret washed over me, and as I stood up to find the clothes we had thrown around, the front door opened and my husband came in. I closed my eyes and wished it was a dream or the universe was just playing a joke on me, and I'd opened my eyes to see my husband wasn't there. Sadly, it didn't work that way, and I opened my eyes to find my husband staring straight at me, too shocked to say anything. On the other hand, my ex hurriedly dressed up and ran out the door, leaving me to deal with the mess we both made. My husband angrily left the house just when I opened my mouth to explain. I knew there was no form of explanation to actually give, and all I had to do was beg, so I started calling his number, but he wouldn't pick up. He didn't come home that night, and at a point his number was off. I wanted him to come home at least so I could beg him, and let him know it was just stupid lust and he's the one I love now and forever. I was too ashamed to even call any of my friends to tell them my husband had left home. I couldn't stand the looks they'd give me. Overnight, I had become like those who I once judged. My husband didn't return my calls or reply any of my messages. My ex was calling, but I didn't pick up because I had nothing to say to him. My home was about to be ruined because of him. My husband sent me a message that night to leave the house and expect the divorce papers soon. I read that message more than thrice. I couldn't believe he'd just decide to divorce me and forget how far we have come. I know divorce is not an option for me, and I'm not ready to leave my husband, but I need to find a way for him to come home so we could see face to face, and I'd explain to him how it was just a mistake that has zero chance of reoccurring. Story 2. I've been with my husband for almost 15 years, married 11 of them, and we have 2 young boys together. The reasons for stepping outside of my marriage has nothing to do with my husband, and it has nothing to do with the way I feel about him. I cheated for my own selfish reasons that I deeply regret every single day. Some point after I turned 30, I felt bored with my life, kinda sad that I spent my 20s either in a committed relationship or raising 2 kids. Ending up as just another stay-at-home mom also kinda bugged me. Instead of bringing this up with my husband, I instead looked for excitement outside of my marriage. I don't think the details are that important, just that he was an acquaintance in town that we'd known for a couple of years. It lasted for around 7 months, but got physical for the last 4. My husband found out when he got suspicious of my behavior, although at the point he found out it had been over for a couple of weeks. For the next month or so, lots of arguments occurred. Apologies on my part, not sleeping in the same bed, threats of divorce, telling me it was over, etc. After it boiled down, we sat down to talk it through and come to the conclusion this wasn't enough to tear us apart, that we get through it, and a time would come where it seemed like a distant memory. I suggested marriage counseling, but he refused at every turn, stating, "I don't want anyone knowing my business. I don't care if it's a stranger or not." Fast forward to 2 years to now, and our relationship feels completely different compared to before my affair. Our sex life took a while to get going again after the affair, but it's never been the same. It never feels passionate or as loving as it used to. He's completely stopped all forms of PDA, which even friends of ours have commented on. Little moments like cuddling on the sofa tends to happen only occasionally now, and it's never for too long before he'll move away. He puts off date night as much as possible. When sleeping in bed, he's almost always got his back turned to me, and just in general, his whole aura has changed. I don't feel like he's cold towards me, just that there's something missing. One of the things that's been bugging me this whole year is back in January, he had an endoscopy performed as he was having very bad stomach pains, which is very worrying because his dad died at 30 of bowel cancer, and stomach cancer runs in his family. I didn't even find out all this until days later, which has bugged me like crazy. Thankfully, he had ulcers and he's being treated for it. The fact that I know he's terrified anytime he gets stomach pains and panics anytime he's in the hospital, but decided to go through it all on his own really hurts me. He didn't even tell me he had stomach pains in the week leading up to him deciding to get checked out, which shows me I've lost something major inside of him. No one in our personal lives knows any of this, so I have no one to seek advice from. I'm not sure what kind of advice I'm seeking, so anything is much appreciated. Thank you. Comments. He has possibly made the decision to stay with you for his children, to keep the family unit together until they are grown. He wants to at least give the illusion of a happy childhood for them. Your cheating has changed his feelings for you in a fundamental sense, and you are no longer the priority in his life. I imagine he will end the marriage when the kids are grown and move on to the next phase of his life. I guess he has nobody to talk to about what happened and feels a great deal of shame and embarrassment, and his reaction is a coping mechanism. As for his medical procedure, he didn't tell you because he doesn't think you really care for him, and he just doesn't trust you enough to confide in with his fears anymore. You are a wife in name only because you failed to live up to that job description. It's the price of betrayal. You have broken his trust and will never get back to the way it was. Of course, he looks at you differently now. He decided to stay with you for practical reasons, like the kids and the high cost of divorce. Consider yourself lucky he decided to try to hold things together. Accept that he agreed to do so on his own terms, and that includes how he feels about you. He does not need to hear more apologies. You have taken a lot of the joy out of the relationship for him, and you need to think of other ways to put some joy back. Do whatever you can to please him and make him happy. I wish you good luck.